Hello there. Neo and I wanted to have a little chat with you this afternoon. I've been thinking a lot about how Legend of the Lighthouse Moon is a magical historical story. So there is a focus on nature, magic and history, and we have the history of the Cape Willoughby Lighthouse and Kangaroo Island, what it was like in 1970, as well as some of the evolution of the Seal Bay sea lion colony. But there is also, I guess, an historical view of what it was like to have type 1 diabetes in that era. And I'm not sure I've seen a novel where it's sort of looked back in time as to what it might have been like for someone who was living with type 1 diabetes. And I shied away from including characters with diabetes initially in my works because I thought, well, it's a fantasy. How is this person with diabetes going to manage this? Or there's a shipwreck, after how many days will they actually not be able to survive because of their insulin or whatever it might have been. And in this story, when main character Mona told me she had type 1 diabetes, I thought, that's fine. Why can't she? And yes, she's going to go on adventures and all sorts of things are going to happen. And she is going to have to find ways to actually work around and work with her type 1 diabetes. And she's going to do that in 1970. So for readers, both those who have type 1 diabetes or their family members or loved ones, and for those who know absolutely nothing about it, it's going to give a little bit of a window into what it might have been like. And I was diagnosed in towards the end of 79 and early 1980. So I have some personal experience of that. And so I just want to show you, when I was out at Book Week talks, I realised that I'd been talking to students about diabetes without going back to the basics of explaining what diabetes actually is. And so I asked some of the children and they came up, this group of year fives came up with some really great answers to that. And obviously there are a few different types of diabetes. There's type 1, type 2, gestational, LADA, which is a version of type 1, and there are other versions as well. But the ones we talk about the most are type 1 and type 2. So this story is looking at type 1, which is what I've got. Now, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition in which the body, for some reason, attacks its own insulin-producing cells called islet cells in the pancreas, and over time those cells become completely unable to produce insulin. So without taking insulin through an injection or a pump, the person with type 1 diabetes will eventually die. And so we have to try and manage insulin, exercise, hormones, stress, sleep, food, and everything that comes along in life that a pancreas that works effectively and does what it's supposed to do can do on its own. And so it's a really difficult condition because with excess glucose running around the bloodstream, it can damage all of the organs and body systems and cause all sorts of problems. So I'm going to show you, Neo and I are going to show you a quick little history of my experiences with that. And so when I was first diagnosed, and I actually don't have this, I wish I did, but I had to use urine testing. So the only way to find out what was going on inside my body in terms of insulin and glucose was to do a wee and dip a dipstick into that. And for some people, they used a reagent tablet that went in with some water and some urine, and basically to see what colour it turned. Now, this was already had passed through the body, had already been processed by the kidney. So it was kind of a little bit late, really, but it was the only thing we had to judge what was going on. And it was just the amount of glucose, the amount of sugar that was actually coming out of our body, and whether that was a lot or a little bit or a medium amount. And that was the guide that we had. Fairly soon after I got type 1 diabetes, blood glucose testing became an option at home, blood glucose monitoring at home. And this, I'm very pleased that my father kept these things and my mother. This was my original glucometer, and it's big. It's like the old brick phones, it's big. And you used to have to put a strip in here, and you would prick your finger, and there was, from my memory, you had to put it on the strip, and then you had to dab it off, and you had to put some chemical on it, and you had to wash that off and dab it off and then put it in, and you had to calibrate it, and then you had to wait. And I think it was quite a few minutes that you had to wait for the result. Not overly portable. I had a setup in the corner of my room. And in those days, I was taking, I think, a couple of insulin injections a day, which were pork, so pig insulin. And I took those by either a syringe that you had to screw the needle on, so it came in two parts, or Dad also had a box of these insulin syringes, which were used and then tossed away in a sharps container. And after a little while, I got this slightly smaller glucometer machine, still quite big, still quite complicated. And it says on there that it was 50 drop, 50 seconds, then 20 seconds you had to blot it, then you put the strip in, then you read it after that. So again, quite an involved process. And eventually, after quite a while, they also came up with the idea of these pens, which are used in all sorts of things now for insulin and for lots of other things. And you screw the insulin you put into here, and you screw it back in, and then you can dial up how much insulin you need to use. And you can have one for long-acting or short-acting insulin, because when you replace insulin, you've got to replace what's called the basal or the background insulin that's always running around the body. And you've also got to replace that fast-acting amount of insulin that comes out when you eat or when your blood sugar is a bit too high. So if you have a functioning pancreas, your pancreas is doing what it needs to do in conjunction with other hormones as well, not just insulin, to keep things nice and steady for you. The liver's involved as well because it stores glucose, and there are things called glucagon and all sorts of different things involved in that. And in type 1 diabetes, that's all very messed up. Now, nowadays, the blood glucose monitor I have is that big. Takes seconds, and if you look at it compared to this one, you'll see how much of a difference it is. And there's no chemicals or blotting or whatever else involved. And the main way that I actually monitor my blood glucose now, and I'm very lucky to have this, you'll see in my arm, sometimes it's in my tummy, this little transmitter here. Underneath my skin, this is clipped into a sensor, which has got this great big contraption. Every 10 days, I whack that through my skin. The little sensor stays under the skin. That is sensing all the time what my blood glucose levels are doing. And this little transmitter lasts 3 months, so this must be changed. It gets moved every 10 days to the next sensor. At the end of 3 months, you've got to start a new one because the batteries run out. And that communicates with my insulin pump. Now, this is connected to me 24/7, except when I have a shower. And there's a little needle in my tummy, and I'm going to show you those, not in my tummy, but I'm going to show you what they are in a minute. And I change the insulin in here and the little needle under my skin every 2 days. This has a chart, a graph, and at the moment you can see I'm 10.4. You might not be able to see, but I'm 10.4. I was a bit high when I went out after lunch, and my blood sugar level's coming down. So not only can you see what your blood sugar level or your blood glucose level is doing on this pump, which is coming from here, but you can see whether it's going steady, whether it's going up fast, up slow, down fast, down slow, down super fast. There's alarms that you can set to wake you up or to alert you that your levels are going up or down or too high or too low. And I also have that connected to a smartwatch through an app that's on my phone. So it means that I can just look down and see what my blood glucose level is doing, a little bit different to doing a urine test, and makes a huge difference to management. Now with the pump, so with this particular one, there are different pumps and they all have their own different stuff that goes with it. But in this one, there's this cartridge that the insulin goes into, and you use this syringe to put the insulin into this. And then this is connected. Now I did bring this with me, but of course I can't find it. What did I do with the box? Just give me a minute, see if I can find it. Here it is. So that is actually connected. This is what sits in my skin, in my tummy. And I'll take it out and show you, because I can use this one tomorrow when I have to change it. So this gets attached to that cartridge I showed you. And then on the end here, and then this little bit, again, there are all different types of this. I only changed to this recently. A few months ago, I was out at it was actually an amazing night of the notables that we put on, the Children's Book Council of South Australia. And it was such a good night, and very quickly my blood sugar levels went absolutely disastrously high. It was really scary, and I had to race home, and the one that I was using back then used to get kinked, and it had kinked, and my insulin hadn't been coming in properly. Shortly after, I changed to this metal one, and it's been life-changing. So this hooks into this. This sticks to my tummy, so that bit sticks to my tummy. And then in here, there's a little needle underneath that. It's a little metal needle and that stays stuck to me. And every 2 days, I change all of that contraption out that I just showed you. Only takes about 10 minutes to do that. And then I'm off and running. Now, things go wrong with technology. You get technology fails. Sometimes the sensors are inaccurate. Sometimes things break down. Sometimes pump sites get blocked, kinked, bleed, hurt, and everything else. But my goodness, it's a long way from urine testing and bricks and pig insulin. And I've seen a lot of changes. So when you read Legend of the Lighthouse Moon, you're going to see what life was like for Mona McKenna in 1970. And I think that it's quite interesting to be looking at a chronic condition in an historical lens. So I hope you've been able to stay with me for that whole time and you've found it interesting. Okay, Legend for Lighthouse Moon is available now for pre-order everywhere, and launches are happening in Adelaide, on Kangaroo Island and in Canberra, and there's more information on my website. Bye-bye.